Most teams treat conflict like a threat that they need to avoid. But what if it's actually one of the most powerful design tools that we have in our toolkit? My guest today, Yaprak Davison, head of design at Goodnotes and former design leader at Spotify, believes healthy conflict is the foundation of trust, and trust is what drives high performance. So if you've ever wondered how to turn tension into teamwork, stick around because this episode is for you. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome. I am super stoked to have you. You ever ship a feature that never should have seen the light of day, or survive a sprint planning where nothing got planned? Or maybe you just said, let's circle back under your breath for the 50th time this week. Well, you, my friend, have earned a Merit-ish badge. Introducing the Beyond UX Design Merit Badges, a vintage-inspired sticker series for UX designers, PMs, and engineers who have seen things. Choose from 3 sets: Soft Skills, Sharp Tongue, the Cult of Figma Initiation, and the Pixel Pusher Survival Kit. And more to come soon, so stay tuned. Each set of 5 badges celebrates the chaos, the coping, and the conference calls that should have been DMs. Stick them on your laptop and flaunt them at your stand-up. Show the world you made it out of Q3 with your sanity mostly intact. Get 1 set of 5 stickers for $12 or 2 sets for $20 at beyonduxdesign.com/badges. Just promise me one thing: send pics and show me where you stick them. How often do you stare at a blank Figma canvas unsure where to start? Well, this episode is brought to you by Mobbin, the ultimate UI and UX design inspiration library. Mobbin gives you instant access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI and user flows from apps you love, and content is added weekly, so you never have to start from scratch again. Quickly find exactly what you need, search by app category, UI patterns, or even specific features. And my team and I use Mobbin daily at work to find useful patterns, and it helps my team work much more efficiently. And honestly, I can't imagine kicking off a new feature without Mobbin. Ready to level up your design process? Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and never run out of inspiration again. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are a regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, and Zoe for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. Get instant access to those videos right now for as little as $5 a month. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the shows worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. So why do so many teams treat conflict like it's a threat? But is conflict so bad? Why can't conflict be a healthy thing? What if conflict is the very thing that builds trust? And we talk a lot about empathy and collaboration and communication and all that stuff all the time, but rarely do we ever talk about disagreement. So today we're going to unpack how conflict, culture, and leadership all connect, and how the best leaders turn some tension into clarity with my guest today, Yaprak Davison. Yaprak is the head of design at Goodnotes, an AI note-taking app that helps people write, think, and collaborate more intelligently. She leads a 30-person global team focused on scaling design systems and leadership structures that help great work thrive on its own. And before Goodnotes, she spent 5 years at Spotify, where she led the design team that brought podcasts and the audiobooks into Spotify's core experience. Thank you, Yaprak, for helping us there. I appreciate that. She later became director of product design in the personalization division, shaping how Spotify's users discover and connect with content that they love. Also, thank you again. Appreciate that. Earlier in her career, she held senior design roles at Fjord and Publicis and founded a creative studio in Istanbul. She also writes Leadership as Craft, a Substack newsletter and mentoring program for managers, senior managers, and directors moving from leading ICs to leading leaders. She helps them grow through systems, clarity, and candor, and she's going to help us grow today. Welcome to Beyond UX Design. I am so excited to have you on. How's it going?
I'm thrilled to be here. It's going really well. Such a wonderful intro.
So I know I read that little bit about you, but tell us a little bit about you, and ultimately, how'd you come to this realization that conflict might not be such a bad thing, and maybe we can leverage it to help our teams grow?
Yeah, well, did my design career as a visual designer and really focused on the aesthetics and building what looks good. And then I moved more onto product design and UX design. This was before iPhone, and tackling problems. And as you navigate teams and work with cross-functional partners, I realized quickly that it's not just about the good design, but it's also good conversations, navigating people, as well as navigating whatever design tool we used at the time. Conflict is a very natural part of that. You don't learn that like I didn't learn that in family, in everyday life. It's something to be avoided. You want to keep harmony, even in design school. You want to build, even kitsch has to have harmony and things like that. So you always optimize for that, being that glue, building that harmony. And it took me some time to realize, wow, when we disagree or conflict happens, that adds a really good tune to that harmony and makes it even better. And you should lean in there. That's a great opportunity. So yeah,
So let's talk a little bit about what we can actually do with a conflict when we manage it correctly. Because like you said, conflict isn't always bad. Sometimes we need to talk about these things, but we often feel like it's uncomfortable. I'm curious, like, what do you think the real reason why designers avoid conflict in the first place? Like, why do we run away from it? Why don't we embrace it more?
Yeah, I think it's not fear. It's lack of clarity and guidance on how to do it well. Like designers are trained to harmonize. So friction in that relationships or like when you're building within teams, when that happens, it feels like a failure. And then silence trades short-term comfort for long-term confusion. And like misalignment, then it hardens and it gets real because it shows in roadmaps, it shows in rework and things like that. And I don't think we learn how to navigate that effectively. So when you think disagreement is unwelcome, I think that kills creativity faster than a blunt critique ever would. And the reason why I think designers, myself included early in my career, avoided it is because I didn't know how to navigate it. I didn't know how to use it or sometimes even recognize it. Because conflict doesn't happen, people don't come to you and say, well, we disagreed on this. They have more like silent replies or no replies, or sometimes like passive aggressive turnbacks or come arounds, or you feel like you're aligned and then you find out a totally different decision has been made. So like it also comes as surprise. So you need to train that gut and that muscle into recognizing when disagreement doesn't happen so obviously. And I think those are the reasons why us as designers, we avoid it because we don't know how to navigate it or use it.
Yeah, so I love that. So we could talk all day about how to use conflict as a driver for trust and team cohesion and ultimately higher performing teams and things like that. But there's probably a lot of people out there listening that it feels comfortable for them. It feels like, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to piss people off. I want to be the nice person on my team. But before we talk about the benefits, let's talk a little bit about the pitfalls. Like what happens when we avoid conflict from your experience? Because you've been doing this for a long time. You've probably seen teams avoid conflict. What ends up happening with those teams long term? Like you said, sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term, I don't know what the right word is, the opposite of productivity. I'm having a brain fart right now, but you know what I'm saying? So what happens when we avoid conflict for everybody out there who might be on the fence about trying to embrace conflict? What happens if they avoid it?
Well, I can tell a personal story there. When you are in like leading product areas, and I had this quadro partnership, like you have an insights leader and tech leader, a product leader, and then a design leader, me being the design leader. We avoided, I think, because you're at the start of the team, growth development stage. You try to optimize for getting along and like being that, yeah, we get along really well and then we want our team members to get along like we do. But then clashes start happening in external meetings. Decisions are made when you're not in the room. Some other discipline, some other setup, some other across team sync that affects your work so that you don't get to achieve the good design you wanted to achieve. So it happened to us. And then we stayed polite, we liked each other, but we were slow in decisions, or maybe we realized them too far at the end of that, like we are not aligned, we are not on the same page. So what happens is it costs on your product. You don't get a really good product because you could have made better decisions by having these healthy debates. It costs on your team because the things you've unclarified, they have to clarify while you're not there and they try to sort that out, and somebody asks, why are we doing this? Maybe they don't have the answer either. So it leads to that confusion. And then that slows everybody down. So much better could have happened in that moment. So in that case, in my personal story, when we realized this, I just went to my partner and said, I think we're disagreeing quietly. And it's dragging us in the execution. Like we're not disagreeing very openly. And then like we talked about it, we named it. We're like, okay, what are the perspectives we have and all of that? And then we were like, well, why don't we make this a habit? Why don't we have a topic every week where we anticipate these disagreements and these clashes and talk about them? We had our weekly sync, so we did a totally different meeting. You could use the same meeting. Just 30 minutes dedicated to, okay, what do you think you'll be disagreed on? What's the hot debate right now? What do you think is coming? And then everything I mentioned, like when you don't align or when you avoid conflict, started, like the opposite effect started happening. So you get productivity, yes, but also it like triples or double speeds. And I think you enjoy your work more because it becomes exciting. It becomes about that curiosity into what is this other smart person thinking about that I might not be thinking about right now? What's their perspective? And then that design curiosity into your everyday conversations comes in, and you start exploring as if your stakeholders, your partners are your users. They get to experience you. So it's still experience research in a way. So yeah, I think when you don't avoid it, it has that double effect. And when you avoid it, it slows things down and it makes your team weaker.
Yeah, so you mentioned something before that this is not something that we're ever taught in design school, how to manage conflict. I would venture to guess most people are not taught how to manage conflict in any school that they go to. I don't even know if like MBAs have courses on this. Maybe there's an elective you could take perhaps. But this is probably something most people are not aware of at all. And I would say most designers in general are not prepared for management or leadership in general either. So my question for you is, how do you go about coaching this as a leader, leading 30 people all across the globe? Just cultural differences, norms are different from one to the other. The way, I've worked with people in Europe and the United States. I'm going off on a tangent here, but I always find this hilarious. But I worked for GE Aerospace for a long time, and we worked with a team in the United States. We worked with a team in Hungary for a long time, and we also had people in India and Mexico and East Coast, West Coast, which it's funny you think about the differences culturally from US to Europe, but even like East Coast to West Coast, very different cultures too, about how people interact and talk and stuff. But anyway, we had this team in Poland that we had just gotten this team, and for like the first month, they were all like thanking us all the time. Like, thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And one day we were sitting in there, like talking to one of the guys, were like, why do you guys keep thanking us? This is just like weird, And they're like, oh, we all had a cultural education class about Americans, and they told us that Americans like to be praised and thanked for their work. And I was like, what? Are you serious? That's so weird. So anyway, I don't know, but that's not necessarily conflict. That might be like thinking about how to avoid. So anyways, maybe there's some places where you have courses where you learn how to like deal with stuff like this. But even then, I don't think it's exactly what we're talking about. Anyway, that's just a funny anecdote. But I'm just curious, like, how do you coach all these people from all over the world with different backgrounds, different cultural norms and stuff, to appreciate the value in that conflict in a thoughtful, productive way?
Lovely anecdote. I think there's this book called The Culture Map by Erin Meyer, and it goes into the cultural differences. It is true, in our team, we have many different backgrounds. People are all over the world, from US to Hong Kong to Europe. But I think there's a formula that I try to coach, like senior ICs, managers, senior staff, like anyone who's expected to lead work. They usually come up with a case of, oh, this is not working. I'm not agreed with this partner. I ask them first, what is actually happening? What's the story? And then what's the story you're telling yourself that's happening? So it's that first internal awareness into this person doesn't like my ideas, or this person always says no, always pushes back. Well, is that really true? Or what's really happening here? So first recognize and understand what's happening in your inner world. That's what shapes your reality and shapes how you communicate. Then we go into, all right, how can you recognize when this is happening? You go, notice early. What are the early signs? Watch for avoidance patterns. Watch for delayed replies. Maybe some passive agreements, over politeness. Like untangle the facts from the feelings. What is the issue? What are you telling yourself about it? And then watch out for, collect some data. What's happening in the everyday? First thing is recognize that something is wrong, something wants clarity. And then I think the part I coach them, once that's recognized within the same session, maybe it was like, can we name it? What's happening here? Maybe it's like optimizing for different goals. Let's clarify what matters most. What's the shared intent here? Can you define what the problem is with the facts you have at hand? And then the question goes into, well, how can you turn this into a co-designing moment? This is just like an input. Imagine a user didn't like your design, they don't use it in the way you expected them to use it. User experiences cannot be designed. They can be designed for. Everybody has a different path. And this person has a different path on your idea. Like, how can you turn it into that collaborative session? That we sometimes that indulge if the stakeholder or the person they have this with is super analytical. It's more like, how can you speak their language? How can you bring the problem from their perspective as well? Recognize that both. And then that opens the open conversation. So I'm like, all right, we've got the tools, we've tested this. Go and have the conversation, call the conflict out, them into the conversation, define and agree on what is it that you're not agreed on first. I think that unlocks a lot because it brings that honest human curiosity into that partnership. And then once they agree what they're not agreed on a different perspective, then it's like using frameworks really well. Let's go back. Like there are types of alignments that don't happen. Maybe you're in different teams and you take the goal and understand it, but you interpret it differently. Find out what is that you're not really going after for that. Because when the values are different of like why you're in it, the goals are different. When the goals are different, conflict starts happening. Or maybe it's at the execution level, like you're aligned in all of these and then you're not aligned on like coordinating and adjusting and things like that. That also happens too. But once that happens, you start using these methods. So I try to coach these people, and at first I try to recognize the conflict that's about to come because they don't have the tools, they don't recognize. I can as a coach hear it. And then I think as we practice that, they start recognizing it naturally themselves. And then when they practice speaking, it becomes more natural. They have their way of bringing it up, their way of talking about it. And as they see, oh, this actually works, this made my relationship, this made the project better, that is all about making that up within the process. So when it happens, it's like making it maybe in your leadership group, like mention that conflict, talk about it, and call out that person, how they navigated it, and turn that into a better decision and celebrate it. So you create that culture where disagreement is celebrated. It's expected, it feels, it's like part of being productive. It's managed constantly, but not like micromanaged, not, oh yeah, we have to notice that so it doesn't become a big thing. It's this little monster and we didn't let it grow, but it's more, it's this great disagreement. Wow, maybe we get a better decision out of this. And then through that, they learn how to take these steps. And I think once you do that with one or two leads in your team, they start helping each other that way too. Yeah. And that's the happy scenario. I'm sure it doesn't always go this way.
I love that. Yeah, because it's funny, like when you have like a really close relationship with somebody, right, and you have a disagreement, you try to avoid the disagreement, and this is in a personal relationship or something like that is my experience, right? And you want to avoid the conflict, so you don't bring it up, and then it just explodes. And then if you're really close with that person, usually that's not the end of the relationship, but you always feel better afterwards. You got it off your chest. You heard what they had to say. They heard what you had to say, and you feel better. And a lot of times you end up getting closer after that conflict. And I think a lot of times we try to avoid it just to feel safe. But like you said, afterwards, it's like a weight lifted off your chest and you feel really great. The question I have for you is, ultimately when you approach conflict and you spark that sort of like conversations, like we're going to figure this out. What is the goal? Is the goal like agreement? Is the goal alignment, like you just mentioned? Because those things I don't think are the same, right? Like I might disagree and you might disagree. We have like completely separate visions for the future of the thing, but we can still be aligned on what the understanding is, the context, the facts. We can still have alignment. Even if we don't agree on the direction, we can still be aligned and have the right expectations. Even if I think you're wrong, you think I'm wrong, whatever. So I'm curious, like what is the goal? Is the goal agreement, or is the goal alignment, or is it something else?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think it's clarity. Like you said,
clarity. Okay.
Maybe we are not agreed totally, and we optimize for some parts of what you're saying, some parts of what my vision is. But in the end, the output, for example, do you have a living scope document? That's a great social contract that you have between the two teams. It states what you'll do, what you don't do. The idea is that, especially as a leader, the clarity you bring will help your teams do not waste the time on bringing that clarity themselves. So I think that's disagreement, that conversation, and then tying that into, all right, what are we going to do? What's the outcome? What does this mean for our roadmap? What does this mean for our vision? What are we going to update? What are we not going to update? I think one of the tools I didn't mention, reducing opinion fights, because it's a big world. Everybody is right in their own world. But, when it's like words, introduce more confusion. But if you make things very visual, tangible, especially with all the tools out there, prototyping is much faster. That prototype and reduce those opinion words multiply disagreements, but I think prototypes collapse them because you show what you think and you're like, all right, if we take this opinion as a guidance, here's how the experience will be. If you take this, here's how it will be. Or maybe it's not a single moment in the user journey, maybe it's a wider decision. Then I kind of show that in the journey, show that in the holistic thinking and how things connect. And talk the risk language, talk about the impact of the decisions. Why is better, the other is worse. But only if we do this, here's the benefits, here are the risks. If we do this, here is the benefit, and here is the risk. Again, to your question, I think if we bring that, clarity comes, and that's time not wasted for your team members. And then when that unclear, like something happens, and there's a change in that clear point, then you can go back and update your document. as long as it's communicated wider. I think that's the leadership you need to bring, is those answers.
I love that you call this out, because as a leader, one of your jobs is to bring clarity and help drive your team towards action, towards the goal. You're responsible for getting those people to do that work and achieve that goal. I don't think anything kills morale as much as lack of clarity, ambiguity, and all that momentum just stops. Suddenly I'm like, what am I doing? What is the point of this? Am I just going to spend all day doing this for you to tell me I was wrong or change your mind later? That lack of clarity kills motivation, momentum, and teams just stop moving. I love that you call out that the goal is ultimately clarity. Being aligned on the fact that there's no clarity isn't helpful. Right? Like, if our disagreement is still so great that we don't have a clear path forward and we don't know what we're going to do, I love that. I feel like that's such an important thing to think about. So let me ask you this. We talked briefly a while back when we were prepping for the call. One of the things that you mentioned is tension is where trust is ultimately born. And it got me thinking about just the importance of overall like trust with high performing teams. Like Google, I think, had done a lot of studies where the highest performing teams weren't the smartest people. They weren't the most talented. They were the people that worked really well together, and they trusted their colleagues to fail, to make bad decisions and learn from those decisions and things like that. Those were the ones who were the highest performing. And so I love that idea of how this tension can ultimately build trust. I wonder if you'd talk a little bit about that and how we can leverage some of that trust building from having those hard conversations to ultimately become more high performing and do our jobs even better than we were before.
Yeah, when I onboard on a team, my role is leadership. It's a new team, and you start observing the dynamics in the team. Again, I try to define what stage in this group development. There are few rule books or few definitions of it. The idea is that by stage 2, tension begins, conflict begins. And if you can help your team navigate that well to build more trust, you go to the next stage as well. You don't need to question your role in the team or what others think about you, interpersonal relationships and things like that. You can focus on the work. But also there is that side, if you don't know how to manage that conflict really well, it creates more harm. It has more blame language. People lose even further trust. The human person A doesn't have their back and things like that. And that really hurts the team. So I think as a leader, your role is to help them navigate, but also help them navigate this in a systematic format so that you don't need to be there facilitating all the conversations and all the sessions all the time. You need to show and take that risk of here's what you can do, but go and then try it. Did it work? Maybe you could try something else and all of that. So to your question, yes, building that tension into trust, that's key. How do you do that is those macro moments, and then like create that system into what happens I'm not here. What happens when I'm not facilitating? Is this becoming our culture? Is this becoming the way we navigate work? Or is this introducing more us versus them, this discipline versus that discipline? And those like they statements like, oh, they don't care about the user. They only care about the metrics. And it's like, no, metrics and the user, they go hand in hand. Like, without the users, those metrics are not going to come, even if they don't think about the metrics and things like that. So like bringing that, this is us together with tackling that problem language. I think I did like diverge from your question there. How do I
That's
try
okay.
to solve?
No, it's fine. That's the whole point of the show is we diverge and we converge, and it's like a quadruple diamond in the show sometimes. No, but I love that. And the thing that I keep hearing you say, over and over is this idea of the trust, the micro interactions. It's not an overnight thing, right? We often talk about, everybody who's ever taken a leadership class knows about storming and norming and performing, all the various states. And it's so natural for humans to get into groups and function this way that, people have written countless books and things about it. But it's interesting because, those stages, what are the stages? It's storming, norming, performing. I'm missing one. There's 4.
Yeah. And there's
I'm
also the
missing one.
Susan Whelan one. That's the one I really like.
But it's one of those things where, every stage or every group goes through those stages, but some get stuck in a certain stage for longer than others. So, the storming phase might take a really long time with the wrong people, and it might take them a really long time to get to norming and performing. And I'm curious, you scaled a team from 10 to 30, a global team. You talked about those little micro interactions that kind of help build trust over time. I want to sort of pivot now to talking about how that conflict and embracing conflict and trust can sort of start to build that trust to ultimately build high-performing teams. This alone could probably be like several 2-hour-long conversations, I'm sure. But I want to talk about how did you prevent dysfunction, or better yet, how did you use those inevitable moments of conflict to ultimately leverage that to scale trust so that your team could get performing faster than normal?
I think first thing is like how will you show up as a leader? Of course, everybody says this, right? Like you need to practice what you preach. I'll put that aside. What are the actions you can do? I think it's build systems before you scale. But also don't wait too long to be like, oh, this team is not perfect yet. I cannot hire more. Like you can parallelize them while you're doing, but build that system in. What does that mean? Have clear role definitions, have clear way of working, like a shared understanding within your discipline first, or like how do we navigate this space? What's that ideal process look like? And then after, how do we break it? What are the good ways of breaking it? And things like that. What are like visible, clear rituals? Are there any rituals we shouldn't have? Like maybe it's too many and like everyday people's everyday reality is not really contributing to their success going into these many meetings. And then kill them and like all of that. But define that definition of good into how your team operates first. Because if you scale without cleaning these and like defining these, you're going to scale complexity, you're going to scale confusion. But if you scale the system that's going to sustain it first, then people, as they come in, they're going to know their role and then what they're going to do. For example, when we grew and hired even more designers to our team, one of the first things I did was I staffed strong first line leads, like really strong ICs who maybe didn't have a leadership role before and they didn't know if they wanted to do IC or management. And like my point was, don't try to decide in between. There's a leadership need. There's so many ways to lead. You can lead without being a manager through the craft. There's so many ways. Do it your own way, but here's a problem. Here's an opportunity area. Here's a product area. Do you want to be the one that's like, does this leadership? Some people enjoyed it and tried in it. They even went into management and like did that even more. And some people said, nope, not for me. I want to stay in the craft. I want to be focusing more on the details and things like that. And that's also a different type of leadership too. But it's just like giving them the opportunity to discover themselves and their strengths. Also giving me the opportunity to see where they shine, where they have these strengths. And then once that happens, I look at the team members who model like strong craft and emotional maturity to navigate that. And then I encourage them to produce artifacts to show, here's how we navigated this conversation. Here's the prototypes we built to discuss the options. And here's a risks document or whatever those artifacts that are repeatable by other teams in the company. So leaders or leads in these teams start learning from each other and those artifacts start getting reused. And that starts setting in like a way of working and this is how we do it. Oh, so-and-so did that in their team and they did this type of presentation, this type of documentation, or this type of workshop. I'll see if that works for me and they start using each other's work. And then what you do is you build your own leadership team. And not only you can coach them, but they start coaching each other. That's a system in itself that like they operate even you're not there. And then that system builds a team that can metabolize friction and like work with it because they have the flexibility, they have the trust, they have the other people to lean on to work that through. So I think that's how I went through that as we hired more people, as we brought more maturity in the team and brought more people in. What's the culture we're bringing them into? Because every time, like according to this group development stages, again with Susan Wheeler, every time a new member comes, whatever stage you're in, you reset, but you go from 1 to 3 really fast. If your culture is clear, it's visible, and it's seen in the everyday behavior of the team members. So scale your team system, how it works before you hire. That helps some people who are growing their teams.
I love that. Well, there's so much unpacked there. Something I just want to call out before I forget is metabolizing friction. Like you just said, I love that. Like, you sort of take the friction and you use that to help grow and to help build your muscles and all that stuff, and you don't shy away from it. I've never heard that term before, metabolized friction, but I really like
It
that
just
idea. I don't know
came.
if you came up with that. I love that. But you should coin that. Put that on a mug or something. Anyway, I want to call that metabolized friction out. It's such a great metaphor for how we can use that friction to actually help us grow and help us get to a better place. I really love that. Something else that you called out that I just want to maybe talk about for just a second is this idea of us as leaders, and something that I've heard a lot of people, and I used to say this a lot, like leadership behaviors. Like you might not want to manage, but show these leadership behaviors. And I had somebody give me feedback once that they really don't like the term leadership for themselves, and it sort of scares them because for a lot of people, I think, rightly or wrongly, leadership implies management. It implies not doing the work as much. It implies managing people in the HR aspect of being a leader. And I did an interview a long time ago with a guy named Dr. David Leitner, who talks about this concept of followership. I don't know if you've ever heard of followership before, but you could sort of think of it as the yin to leadership's yang, right? You could have really great leaders, but there's more followers than there are leaders, right? We have one manager to many people. It's not about being a leader like you're in charge, like you have a team, but just like you mentioned before, like leadership in craft, right? People look up to you. They see your work and they come to you with questions or something. Like that's being a leader, even though you are not, quote unquote, a manager or quote unquote, a leader with an official title. But I love this idea of followership because just like you mentioned, these teams that you've built, they empower each other to sort of grow and to do these things based on the culture and the culture that you've built. And I see those people as like really great followers because followers are not like sheep. It's not like I'm only doing what I'm told. Like a really great follower will understand the direction and take the direction and run with it and know what they need to do and do the things the right way without having to ask 1,000 questions, without having to be told exactly how to do it, without, having to have clear and explicit instructions laid out to do the thing. And so I love that. I just can't help but think about this. I don't know if you have any thoughts about this concept of followership. I don't know if it's the first time you've heard it. But I love it. Kind of when I hear you talking about that, the first thing I thought of was Dr. David Leitner's concept of followership and how teams can embrace that idea without having to be quote unquote leaders.
100%. I haven't heard that term before, but I love it. And I think when you form your leadership team, how many? 5 people, whatever, but like those are the people who are helping others lead. And then they have their teams under. I think leadership is a team sport. It's not something I do. It's like what we do as a team. And we should, it's like rotating seats. We should take seats at it. Sometimes one of the leaders in my team leads it and I follow. Sometimes I go in and I'm like, treat me as your intern and I'll do the hands-on design here. Because I'm a designer. That's why I'm in this. And things like, so I show how I follow. I model how I follow. And I think that's a great way of saying, okay, now you're at this seat, now, because it's a job. You do the job of the leadership and I do the job of doing the craft part. Next time I'll do the leadership and you'll do the craft part. And it's just different hats we wear to get something done. And we can all step in each foot for each other and cheer for each other to do that better. Once you have that, I think culture, leadership starts, decisions start rotating as well, as long as there's clarity. And this doesn't lead to ambiguity, of course. Like you need to define those roles. But also what you said inspired me to, when I started moving from more like IC roles to leadership roles, I was quite scared if I would lose my craft. And I didn't want to lose it. I still design hands-on. That's where I play. That's where my passion lies. That's my reason why. Why would I want to lose that? To do more meetings, more alignments, more people set up and things like that. And then after a while, I realized leadership is a craft too. I've mastered the things I need to master in design as much as I can, and I'm still learning. It never stops. But leadership is also a craft that I need to learn and master. And once you approach that as a craft, now I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not navigating the work through the prototypes I build. Now it's through the people I coach or the people I work with. That's a new craft too. And just like design, you do it collaboratively. So you don't go, why are you doing this leadership craft, right? Like you are open to changing and rotating roles in there for others. And then when you can show, you can follow really well too. It's not just one person leading others, but it's like how you lead as a team together, how you're open to switching hats of decision making. That's when the harmony begins as well. Again, this is a very idealistic state, but I think once you show that in your culture, which is that your repeated behavior every day, like you mentioned, they can lead without being a manager. Yes, they lead through that repeated behavior of setting the norms of how they operate and showing what good looks like. And that showing that leads to good design and wonderful outcomes. And, they have fun while they do it. Others look up to that and say, well, how did this person do that? Well, they shared half-baked work. They called out misalignments. They had conflict and they navigated that through curiosity and approached it very openly. There are habits that build those things. And then once others start repeating them, that I see is a leader because they show how to get things done. And others follow.
Something I want to actually talk about, to pivot a little bit and talk about how you built a team, especially like a high-performing 30-person global team across the globe. I don't know how much of them are technically remote or work in an office just in a bunch of different locations. I mentioned earlier I used to work at GE and we had a bunch of offices and they were all spread out, but we were all actually in an office just all over the world. And now since COVID, I don't know what it's like in Europe where you are, but in the States, we've got a lot of teams trying to push to go back to an office. But there's still a lot of teams that are remote first and people are working from home, so they're not co-located in an office. And I'm curious, building a high-performing team, well, one, actually, before we even get to the high-performing team part, I feel like culture plays into this potentially, but there's also a lot of conflict when we are talking through DMs. We're not talking in person anymore. We're making a lot of inferences about how someone is delivering a message in our head because we read it and we didn't see their body language, and maybe people have their cameras off, so we hear something but we don't see their body language, things like that. So anyway, I feel like it just it's a breeding ground a lot of times for misunderstanding and conflict. And I'm curious, like, how do you leverage that remote workforce while keeping sort of conflict top of mind and also like building a high performing team while everybody is in different parts of the world?
Well, at
That was a loaded
Goodnotes, we
question,
have
by the way. I'm
offices.
sorry.
Yeah. We have offices. So some people are in person and they can get in a room, use the whiteboard, tackle that problem. Some people like myself, we work from a country. I'm based in Sweden. Yeah, I think I'm like the second employee here. We don't have an office and I work from co-working space or from home. And like you said, communication goes through. And then there's time differences. There's like people in the Asian time zone, people in the San Francisco time zone, European time zone, things like that. So sometimes you read a reply and there's 20 different replies under it because they worked the day while you were sleeping. Now you come into the conversation and you're like, oh, I wish I had that answer. Like the first thing is chill. It's fine because those things happen. The other part is instead of doing these long Slack messages, can you capture decisions in a document? And then you can capture options in a document so every decision is in one place and you don't need to go through multiple forums and things like that. And then the other is like get in a call. It's true for conflict as well. Go to the source where the disagreement is happening and have that conversation. That really helps too. And then it's your rituals. Rituals do build culture. So are there any rituals to make time to speak about this? So make sure that you both or whatever party can be available there. Are there rituals where you do product updates or like project updates into the state of where the project is, like maybe every 2 weeks, maybe every 3 weeks, whatever your cadence is, like what changed, why did we change it, what's going to happen next, so that other teams can be seen. Build those rituals in place as well. And within your team, I think I always say this, and I had it in my previous team too, like you never walk alone. We ask each other, oh, who did you design this with? Who did you think this problem with? Because the remote work, you can feel very alone in the problem. No ritual will give that, but reach out to another person, iterate with them, design together, think it through with them, or your research partner, maybe your content design partner. So like, then you're never alone. I love it when the project finishes and we never can call this person did it because all of us touched it somehow. That creates that collaborative culture more, and then you feel that in your everyday. Even though you're remote, you're not alone because you have people you go with and you iterate with and you talk with. And I think that's how we build connection into the work.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have any tips for people who are dealing with some of that conflict that might be remote, like how they might handle that differently from a team who might be in person and can work together? Do you have any thoughts there? Is it different? Is it the same framework you mentioned before? Or is it different?
I'm sure it's similar in some ways, but one of the things is systemizing it again. Like you see a conflict that's happening and you're like, this product manager or this person goes into Figma, leaves a bunch of comments, and I'm still designing. That's a conflict moment in the way of working, for example. It's done because you're async. Actually, that person is trying to find a way so that they can give feedback to you at the point, at the place, so you can use it, but it's obviously not working for you. Then you can have the conversation to say, when you do this, I feel this way, next time let's do this, it's not working, etc., like that behavior feedback. But actually you see someone taking a pattern to solve their problem. What you need to do is give a better solution so that they can replace it. You cannot just complain about it and leave it there. So I say systemize it. So you can systemize it to say, within our team, we're going to do design feedback on these days, or I'll let you know, you'll do it in this document, or I'll have a separate page, here's how I want you to do it. Find the solution that's going to work next time and without you needing to facilitate it. So that's my advice. Like when you have these conflicts, like, okay, a lot of Slack, when I post my work, I leave work or I clock out and then a lot of comments happen. Well, okay, what are they trying to do here? They're probably trying to give you a sync feedback, make it work on short time of periods and not waste time and things like that. Understand their intent, assume the best intent, but also understand what are they really, why are they doing this? And then bring up a better solution that is repeatable and propose it to them. If it doesn't work, iterate on it. Approach it as a design problem and iterate it together. So I think one of the things is to define how you're going to work together. Be realistic about the time zones and the facts.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so we have been talking for a little while now, and I've got some questions I like to ask all of our guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. But before we do that, one last thing before we get out of here. What's some advice that you have for everybody out there who might be dealing with conflict, afraid to embrace it and lean on that trust and get them to a place where they actually help to build their team and high performance? What's some one parting advice you want to give everybody listening out there before we get into those questions?
What made you a great designer will make you a great person to navigate conflict as well. That curiosity, trying to understand the user needs, why they do what they do, bring that empathy in, and then start designing solutions for it and see what works, prototype and test, and have those conversations openly, bring that honesty in, and be ready to be super vulnerable about yourself and who you are, because it takes that vulnerability to bring and understand that it's not about you, it's just us together doing one thing.
I love that. So what you're saying is UX your problem and take that UX design process and approach to solving conflicts. I love it. I feel like we could use that, by the way. There's so many things in life where the design thinking process will be effective. I'm really sorry we didn't get to, but for everybody out there listening, we have a giant doc with all these topics that we wanted to talk about today. We only touched on high performing teams a bit, but we also want to talk about how conflict builds trust, high-performing teams, builds better leaders, and how we can use our craft as leaders. Maybe we'll have you come back on and we can talk about the second half of everything that we wanted to get into. There's so much stuff here, but anyway, unfortunately, we have to cut it short at some point. All right, so before we get out of here, I've got a few questions I'd like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. First up, first thing that comes to your mind, you don't have to think too hard about these. What is your favorite non-design book?
Hit my library. Oh.
Put you on the spot.
I need to find the book in English. There's a writer called Amin Maluf, and he has a book called Samarkand in Turkish. I think it's Samarkand in English too. It's a great book, and I think it's one of the books that changed my life because it's about a little bit about mysticism, but also diving into old times and history. It's a time travel, and it talks about and like all the philosophies that build today's philosophies, like the roots. I really enjoy the stories in there. So that's a book I love.
That is awesome. I had not heard of it, but I'll have to check it out. I love that. So you're originally from Turkey. And yes. So when I ask people this, like I always just assume they're going to tell me about an English book. And so I love hearing like books and stuff, like other languages that have to be translated into English first before I could read it. I don't know why this is like very American-centric of me. But anyway, I love hearing that. I love that.
He wrote it in French. Yeah.
Oh, he did. A Turkish guy wrote it in French originally?
No, he's Lebanese, wow. And he wrote it in French. But I read it in so it's
okay, got it. Oh, this is a very international book then. All right. Next up, what is your favorite non-design podcast?
Oh, that's a hard one to tell.
Do you listen to a lot of podcasts, or is you not listen to any? That's why it's hard.
Recently I listen to less, but I'm just opening my episodes on Spotify and finding like what I like.
So you used to work at Spotify. Do you still use Spotify for podcasts? Or
I do. And I like that like a lot of the things we wanted to get in, I'm in there, like the product is getting better.
I host with Spotify, so I'm on the Creators Network, I guess that is.
Oh, amazing.
And it's free, so it's nice. It's like high quality, and I don't have to pay for hosting and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, but the non-design as well is Good Insight with Dr. Becky.
I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, she's a clinical psychologist and a mom of 3, and she shares her takes on parenting questions, and then she has very actionable guidance. They're like short episodes. I'm not a parent yet, but I'm preparing to be, so like it gives me
getting ready
for that journey. I'm like looking at my listening history, and that's what I've been listening the most.
I love that. Well, a dad of 2 kids, 9 or almost 10 and 8, I can tell you that no amount of preparation will prepare you for having kids. So you can read all the books, listen to all the podcasts. That's going to be a shit show for a long time. So
I think it's just accepting that.
Yeah. You know what's funny? This is like having two kids now. Like when you have one kid, you're like, oh my God, this is such a shit show. And then for some reason, you're like, oh, let's have a second. It'll be better. And then it gets even more of a shit show. And then you look back at the time when you had one kid, and you're like, God damn, you remember when we only had one kid to worry about? Remember that? And like now, my wife and I are like, can you just take one of them so I can have a break? Like one kid now is a break.
Because
So
like
you'll get
you're
there. I don't know if you want
outnumbered
to have more than one
almost.
kid, but yeah, it's funny. Anyway, I don't know. And then I look at like friends that have one kid, only child, and they're just like, yeah, we did this, we did that. Oh, they're so great. Oh, they're so calm. They just like hang out and they're so easygoing. And my kids are like wrestling, punching each other in the face, bloody nose and everything else, like screaming and bloody murder. Anyway, that's my life basically.
Fun
All right.
though.
I wouldn't trade it for anything. I love it. Anyway. All right. Next up, what is your favorite vacation spot?
Yes, okay. And this I know by heart. I am from Turkey, but it's just across Greece. And I love going between Greece and Turkey. So Çeşme is like the Turkish side, but also you can take a ferry to Chios or to Samos. Samos is my favorite island. And every summer we just go there, do, taste the tomatoes, sunshine, slow life, agency. That's where I can live like forever. That's my spot.
So is that close to Istanbul then?
No, it's 8 hours by car,
Oh,
1 hour
Istanbul's
by
that far away.
flight.
Okay. I
Yeah,
was thinking Istanbul was closer to the border
it
with
is.
Greece.
But this is the Greek island, so it's close to north of Greece. What I'm saying is like
Okay.
more central, like to the islands in Greece. But yeah, I used to live in Istanbul, and then there's nice Greek escapes from Istanbul too, but not the agency, not the seaside. I love the agency. I
Got
love
it.
just
Okay.
how the sun hits on your skin there.
Oh, yeah.
It's just beautiful. Yeah,
Who
and
wouldn't?
everything
Who
tastes
wouldn't?
so good.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. Now I'm pulling up a map and now I see exactly what you're talking about. But the geography of Turkey, obviously, I'm not super familiar with. But I've been listening. We were talking about podcasts. I really like history podcasts, and one of the ones that I've been listening to, I just finished it actually. The guy Don, he told the story, but it was the history of Byzantium, and he tells it all the way up until the fall of Constantinople from the Turks and stuff. But he does a tour of all of the historic places in Byzantium. And he goes to Istanbul, but there's all these old Greek, 2,000-year-old buildings and stuff, like all over the place in Western Turkey and Eastern Greece and stuff. And it's like, I would love to go on that tour at some point and check that out.
Incredible, also like how all those cultures built on top of each other.
Right. I know. Just layers and layers. Yeah. It's so
Layers
cool.
and layers. Yeah, it's very cool.
I love that too. Yeah. This is like, I got two kids now, so like I can't go on that freaking tour. So you'll see one day. But yeah, man, the Aegean Sea I've seen pictures and it looks beautiful, and I would love to go to one of the islands at some point.
For me, best place on earth. But
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah.
everybody can say that about their hometown. But
Yeah. No, well, that's cool. So you're like really close to vacation spots. Like people travel from all over the world to where you are from and hang out and get some
Exactly.
great seafood and catch some sun on the beach. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's great. I love that. And you know what's cool? I had a friend from Greece who was talking about this, but like there's really popular spots like Santorini and the Greek islands, but there's also so many little spots that are not tourist traps. You could just go and there's no tourists anywhere around. It's all just locals and great little restaurants, and you could just hang out. You don't have to deal with all the tourists and everything like you would if you were going to some of those other spots. Anyway,
it's like
a
a time machine when life used to be slower.
That's my favorite kind of vacation. Just like go and hang out and like not like Disney World with like rides or something. Just like hanging out on a beach and just pretend like I'm a local for a week or so.
Exactly.
All right. Last question. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
I was going to say Figma, right?
No, not Figma.
Goodnotes. I love Goodnotes because I
There
take
you go.
notes
All
on
right.
it.
Paid for that endorsement? I'm just kidding.
Exactly. I can do diagrams and then do it on the go and jot down ideas. I'm thinking a design tool. Like it used to be pen and paper, but then when I switched to digital note taking, now that's that. I also love doing other types of design. What does that mean? Like designing dresses, sewing, and doing projects that are physical. And I think that really helps me train my design brain. If that's what you were asking, I would say like my sewing machine, if that counts.
Yeah, I love that. Sewing machine, that counts as a design tool. Is that what you said? Did I misread?
Yeah.
Here?
Yeah,
No, that's
the
good.
sewing
Sure,
machine,
yeah,
I
why
think.
not? So do you do a lot of sewing?
Not as much as I'd like to, not a lot, but my mom and my grandma used to be like seamstresses, and
Oh,
my
wow.
mom makes amazing dresses, and I draw them when she makes them. And I just
I love
want to try and like slowly getting into it, not as good as her, but it's just very, yeah, it's fun to do something that's not digital.
I love it. Well, let me give you some unsolicited advice from one parent to another new parent.
Yes, please.
The hobbies that you have, those will be the first to go when you have a kid. You have to make time for them, though, like schedule time for them. Because if you don't make time for them and actively try to make time for those things, well, it will be the first thing to just slip your mind. You'll be like, I'll get to that later. You got to plan for it. You got to schedule time. Make it so that you each have your own spare time. You got to make time. If you don't make time, I'm telling you, this is my experience. The hobbies are the first thing to just go out the window.
Yeah, I have this dream. My mom used to make me and my dolls dresses. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to do that for our daughter. But yeah, if I will have the time, I have 4 months
in
to
between
master
the screaming
my
and
craft.
yelling and the naps and oh man, having kids is great. Anybody listening thinks I'm saying that it's miserable. It's certainly not. It is stressful and it's different, but it's not miserable at all. It is incredibly rewarding. All right, Yaprak. So before we get out of here, let everybody know where they can find you. You got a lot of stuff and resources online that I think would be incredibly helpful and useful for everybody listening to learn more about all the stuff we're talking about. Why don't you go ahead, give yourself a plug, let everybody know where they can find you.
Well, I write on the Substack as Leadership as Craft. On any platform, you can also find me as Yapita on Twitter or on other platforms. And my website, yaprakgültay.com. That might be hard to understand the spelling, but you can see it in the links.
We'll put it in
And
the show
it has
notes.
all my articles and my mentorship courses and everything that I do in there.
All right. I love it. And I just want to say one more time, like, this has been incredible having you on. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing these insights with us. I personally have seen so many times where teams will try to avoid conflict and it just ends up in disaster, and things always end up, just like you said at the very beginning, you trade that initial immediate gratification of comfort with the long-term dysfunction of those conflicts continuing to fester. So this has been incredible. Check out all the show notes for anybody listening at beyonduxdesign.com for links to Yaprak's Substack and her website and all that stuff. And one more time, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been really fun being here.